because there's been a lot. What do you think the astronauts know? Because there's been a lot of astronauts that are famous astronauts that have gone on the record saying that they exist and that they've seen unusual stuff, but for some reason, people as highly credible as them, I think Edgar Mitchell is one of them, is just they're not taken seriously, even though these are incredibly honorable, incredible people. What are some of the astronaut stories you've encountered related to astronaut encounters with UFO?
There's a lot. So the very first NASA piloted missions where we flew at apogee outside the Earth's atmosphere in these specially designed rocket propelled planes that were mounted onto the edge of a modified B-2 bomber's wing. That was called the X-15 missions. And two pilots that flew those missions, the very first pilot, Joe White, noticed a UFO tracking his craft when he was up there. And then I think it's Robert Walker. Yeah, he was one of the later X-15 pilots, and he noticed 5 UFOs, a few above him, and I think 2 others alongside of him. And he was doing a lecture later on when he was a retired astronaut, and he brought a picture from being at, outside the Earth's atmosphere of a UFO that was above the Earth's horizon in space. And I cover that case with the help of Carrie Martinuk in my documentary, NASA's First Missions, Secret Space UFOs, NASA's First Missions. So just from the very beginning, the outset of NASA's astronaut missions, they saw stuff. And Robert Walker even said that it was part of their manned missions to look for things like that because NASA knew that that stuff was up there, but it was a secret, right, from the public. Then you go to the first capsule missions. You've got the Mercury manned capsule missions where they launch this rocket, the capsule breaks off, and it orbits around Earth and then crashes down in the ocean. You have the famous Fireflies incident where an astronaut on, I think I can't remember which Mercury mission, but that astronaut witnessed all these lights. Now, later on, it was realized that that was actually just a undocumented and unrecognized phenomenon where these hydrogen, or no, not hydrogen, these like water molecules basically were floating around the capsule, and the sun was catching light in them, and it made them look like they were glowing like fireflies. But it just showed when he was doing his very first mission, he was so distracted by these like supposed UFOs, and it was kind of like a War of the Worlds moment where everybody on the radio and TV that was trying to tune into that to hear what the astronaut was seeing was hearing about like these strange objects circulating his capsule, which he said they look like fireflies. What are they and stuff? So that piqued the world's interest in what could be out there. But then you have the Gemini manned missions, and during the Gemini manned missions, which Buzz Aldrin was on, he was on Gemini 11. These were also capsule missions that flew around the Earth, and they tested spacewalks in their spacesuits and stuff, and then went back in the capsule and crashed into the ocean on the planet. They witnessed many different strange objects out there. And when you look at the declassified transcripts from the astronauts talking, these conversations were recorded they weren't all televised or sent down to Earth on radio for the public to hear. They were recorded on these like flight black boxes, which during the Gemini missions they were called the VTR, and that transcriber was then later on, you know, documented on paper and classified for 12 years. And when those papers were declassified, UFO researchers poured through them and saw that on many of the Gemini missions, you know, famously Frank Borman on Gemini 7, he said, "We've got a bogey." And bogey usually means unidentified craft or an enemy craft in Air Force terms. And he was an Air Force guy. There was 3 Air Force guys. The rest of the pilots from Gemini and the Apollo manned missions were Navy. So he declared that they had a bogey. But I think what happened earlier on in the Gemini missions, where Scott Carpenter got distracted by a UFO or seeing something strange when he was on his mission, he got back down to Earth. He missed his landing target. He missed his reentry vector, like where he was supposed to go, because he was so distracted by something he saw up there. NASA fired him. And I think that was the starting of teaching pilots, astronauts that were going to be in space, not to talk about that issue. And it carried on throughout the Apollo manned missions. You know, Edgar Mitchell never said that he saw a UFO when he was in space or saw strange, what do you call it, structures on the moon, but he was very interested in the UFO topic, and he believed, he grew up in Roswell, and he spoke to many of the residents, the sheriff, and all these people that witnessed the Roswell, New Mexico crash of 1947. And he knew from a young age that that was a cover up. And then he became friends with people like Stephen Greer and got read into through the CIA from some former CIA member that there was a cover up, there was a UFO crash retrieval program, that there was possibly a reproduction or reverse engineering program. And he was very adamant that we were not alone, that non-human intelligence was interacting with our planet, and that it was being kept from the public. But yeah, it's more than Edgar Mitchell. There's so many astronauts that had experiences that either went on the record or recanted going on the record, like Buzz Aldrin, which I cover in Apollo 1 to 11. I got a chance to interview famous UFO director James Fox about his experience trying to document and get this testimony from Buzz Aldrin about his experience with supposed a UFO tracking the Apollo 11 spacecraft to the moon when they first were on the way to land on the moon. And supposedly, yeah, Story Musgrave, Gordon Cooper. So supposedly Buzz Aldrin saw something. Neil Armstrong, they all saw something, but Buzz changed his story over the years, and he didn't want to talk about it. And when James Fox went to meet with him in Europe to get the goods, Buzz basically ghosted him and said he wasn't going to add to the UFO fire, and he didn't want to give his testimony. So, yeah, Story Musgrave, he saw this, like, there's a video online of an STS mission in which he saw what looked like almost like a worm or something in space. There's Leroy Chow that saw three lights in a triangular pattern fly over him during a mission on the ISS. And Gordon Cooper didn't see one in space. People say that he might have, but his testimony was that he saw one when in the 1950s when he was a test pilot. I think it was might be out at Nellis Air Force Base. He saw a craft land on the dry lake bed, and they apparently filmed it with 16 millimeter film footage. And then he called the appropriate personnel that were higher ranking to ask what they wanted to do with this footage. And some men showed up that were, kind of fit the description of a Men in Black, like, no known military fatigues or rankings or anything, and just confiscated or actually, that's wrong. He apparently mailed the footage and never saw it again.